Welcome everyone to our session titled PwC Cybersecurity Operations Powered by Microsoft and Security Technology. I'm Sandy Christian and I'll be your organizer for this webinar. This session is being hosted on the Microsoft Teams Live platform. To interact in this session, you may type a message or question in the chat window in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Your questions will be addressed in the Q&A portion of the session. If we're unable to address your questions during the session, we will respond post-event. For closed captioning, please click the CC button in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. This session is being recorded, and the recording will be available post-event. At the end of the session, we'll share a link to a brief survey. Please complete the survey prior to leaving the session today. If you're unable to complete the survey before you leave, you will also be receiving an email with the survey information. And now I'd like to introduce the presenters for our webinar. Our first presenter, Umang Handa, is a partner at PwC Canada and is the national lead for Cybersecurity as a Service. He is responsible for leading managed security services nationally within PwC Canada, which includes outcome-focused managed security services in cybersecurity. Our second presenter, Lavanya Murthy, is a cloud solution architect at Microsoft. She has over a decade of experience helping organizations of all sizes modernize security to detect, protect, and respond to threats with Microsoft Security Solutions. Umang, you have the floor.
Thank you, Sandy, for that nice introduction. What I'll be walking you through today, along with Lavanya, is our approach to advanced security operations and also how do we simplify security operations as well. Now, if you look at the security operations itself, the problem with security operations is rising on a regular basis in terms of how complex and costly it can be. We can have a very expensive set of tools which help us detect some very complex attacks, but at the same time, the complexity of the number of tools that an analyst has to go through, as well as the fidelity of information that is provided to the analyst when the alerts fire, is sometimes in question. This leads to a lot of analyst burnout. It also leads to a lot of complexity and a scenario where the analysts are sometimes overwhelmed with the type of alerts. This also means that organizations are not able to manage their mean time to detect, mean time to respond, let alone detecting the right things in a fashion which takes care of false positives to true positive ratios. Ultimately, what this means for the organizations is that the risk profile that they want to change in a short period of time from a cyber risk perspective may be at a risk of not being realized in terms of their objectives. Now, with that said, there are some other challenges that we'll be talking about as it relates to security operations itself. The environment from a threat landscape perspective, as well as from an organizational perspective, is vastly changing and will continue to change. We had a lot of things on-prem in the last decade, and then with COVID and with rapid transformation of organizations, rapid adoption of digitization, and so on, all the organizations have moved to some form of way of putting things on cloud. So whether single cloud, multi-cloud, or hybrid environments, the complexity of threat modeling and log source ingestion has increased significantly. This also means there has been a lot of challenges as it relates to third-party risks, connectivity for third parties, as well as the overall value system and a digital supply chain for organizations, which a security operations also has to deal with. The other element is that the volume of alerts are rising, just like the volume of threats are rising, and that's something that is not new. It's been around for a while, but the fact is the pace of change has increased a lot. One of the key elements to counter this from a security operations perspective that was introduced heavily in the middle of last decade was security orchestration and automation. Although the technology has been in place for a while, the adoption of the technology has been lagging behind quite a bit. And the only reason for that is A, the unique skill sets that are needed, and B, you can't automate what you can't measure. And with everything that's happening with regards to the volume of alerts and complexity of the environment, sometimes some of the improvement initiatives take a backseat from a security operations perspective. Last but not the least, we've been speaking a lot about threat hunting, But threat hunting is an important part of security operations, which is using the power of analytics, using the power of machine learning, human intelligence, as well as machine intelligence. What can we do to find unique patterns from a threat actor perspective? Now, use cases which are correlation based as well as dynamic threat hunting need to play together. And these are some important challenges for the efficacy of a security operations center, which is ultimately trying to reduce the mean time to detect and mean time to respond in a credible fashion. The new generation of threats provide a large deal of complexities from a multi-cloud and hybrid perspective. We have shifted from a technology side of computing to a cloud, which is now a foundation for business innovation. And a lot of the things you see here from a cloud today to cloud future perspective are actually sometimes in place today, although they're said they're in the future, because this change is rapidly having is being rapidly done within the organizations. Whether or not we think we're a single cloud environment, you are actually either a multi-cloud or hybrid environment because you are using a lot of SaaS applications and other third-party applications, which presents a great deal of risk to the organization and should be monitored centrally through an effective and efficient security operations capability. I'm going to hand it over to Lavanya, who speaks about the power of Microsoft with regards to security operations teams and so on. Lavanya, over to you.
Thank you, Mike. So we've heard businesses are embarking on digital transformation to capture new opportunities and to stay competitive against digital native startups. In the past few slides. Because of this, IT also is transforming, right? It needs to support business with technology transformation, with cloud services, modernize development practices, and related changes. What needs to happen along with this digital transformation of business and the IT transformation is the security transformation. The transformation of security to both adapt to the cloud and simultaneously address the increasing landscape of sophisticated threat environment that we are seeing and hearing every day in the news. Shifting to the cloud, shifting cloud for security is more than simply technology change, right? It's a generational shift in technology akin to moving from mainframes to desktops and onto enterprise servers. Legacy and on-premises SIEM solutions really cannot keep pace with the rate of security events that need to be investigated and are not really scalable and require a complex deployment and maintenance. The cloud can really help manage that complexity of expanding digital estate, right? Whether it's multi-cloud, whether that's on-premises, whether that's SaaS solutions, whatever it is, right? A cloud-native SIEM solution is inherently elastic, and the capacity can really help implement that centralized log management as part of the SIEM solution without the scalability, performance, and architectural concerns that plague an on-premises SIEM solution. Eliminating the infrastructure setup and maintenance also enables you to focus on what really matters, right? Protecting your organization, which is the sole role of the SIEM, right? It's not an operational environment that you constantly are keeping up with the storage and the compute resource upkeep. A cloud-based solution can store the logs for longer periods of time and using the cloud scale, right? Pay-as-you-go prices at lower prices while keeping them accessible for reports and investigations as needed. It really simplifies and makes security easy to manage and the core part of the SIEM. And the next generational AI and automation in the cloud will help you supercharge that SecOps by really cutting down on the alert noise and alert fatigue and really correlating the alerts across the security logs you're ingesting. It'll leverage that large scale of intelligence available in the cloud and make it work for you. If you could move on to the next slide, Umang. So Microsoft Sentinel is that cloud native, SIEM solution, security, information and event management, and security orchestration and automated response. Because again, with the amount of the logs that are being ingested or the security signaling that is coming on, you need to rely on automation to really cut through that alert noise and reduce that alert fatigue. Sentinel delivers intelligent end-to-end security analytics and threat intelligence across the enterprise, providing a single solution, a single pane of glass for your alert detection, threat visibility, proactive hunting, and threat response. So the cloud native nature empowers you to deal with the scalability and the flexibility and the speed at which you need to collect the data from multiple resources or additional resources as they come up, right? And you have multiple ways of ingesting data into Sentinel. There are native data connectors, there's APIs, there's Azure functions, microservices, however you want to deal with them, and along with the industry solutions like Logstash and Syslog. Once you have that data ingested, though, you also need a powerful visualization, because again, to really easily detect those threats or see what's going on across the data you've ingested, you have that powerful visualization through Azure workbooks, and you don't need a separate infrastructure to collect that data. And then security strategies have solely been focused on preventing attacks, right? An approach that is insufficient to deal with the modern threats. You really need to ensure your strategy goes beyond prevention and also enable rapid attack detection, response, and recovery to increase resilience, right? If you, in that assume breach, in that zero trust framework of security that organizations are embarking today, you really need that assume breach mentality that attackers are going to compromise some of the resources and work to ensure that those resources and technical designs are balanced between attack prevention and attack management. So Sentinel detects those complex and evolving threats across massive volumes with low fidelity signals using the built-in machine learning developed by Microsoft security experts. And Sentinel also provides you everything you need to expedite that incident response, because the goal is, with that assume breach mindset, you're expecting a breach, but you also need to rapidly contain that to reduce the blast radius. So really streamlining investigations with robust incidents, correlation of the alerts into incidents with built-in automation to quickly help you resolve those threats. It is crucial for SOC teams to not only resolve incidents quickly, but meet those mean time to triage, mean time to resolve thresholds, and quickly contain that blast radius. And finally, with all these efficiency gains, your SOC teams now have the ability to be proactive instead of being reactive all the time, and actually be proactive, go find and stop those threats before they do untold damage. And it includes robust threat hunting tools to help you get ahead of the attackers, with features like live stream that allow you to test queries against the live events as they occur. Bookmarks help you preserve those queries to record your contextual observations and reference your findings by adding notes and tags. Over to you, Umang.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lavanya. So now what we want to move on to is actually how do you do adaptive threat hunting, and what is the approach that you want to use, using the power of what we've developed on top of Microsoft Sentinel and leveraging our global scale within PwC. Now, there is a need to have an end-to-end threat detection management system where the content is integrated and connected between the use cases, the detection use cases, threat hunting, red teaming exercises, and threat intelligence. Often what we see is that organizations take an approach where they start the use case development without taking some of the modern threat vectors into consideration. To that effect, it's very important that one organizes themselves around what are the types of assets that exist in the organization. In understanding the asset landscape of the organization, what organizations typically discover is what are they trying to protect against, or what kind of threats are going to be more pertinent to their environment. What this also means is that they would need some organizational specific data that can provide intelligent information to threat modeling professionals in your security operations to model those threats. These things can range from understanding how threat actors are attacking the industry and geography that you're in, to modeling the threats around key and important vulnerabilities that you may be exposed to, and understanding the attack surface that may result from the vulnerabilities. In addition to this, organizations are using a number of different approaches, such as automated red teaming combined with blue teaming and making it a purple teaming approach where they can tune their use cases, where they can understand their control effectiveness, but also looking at frameworks like MITRE to see what is their overall coverage, ultimately tied to the risk outcome. The second piece of this is ensuring that the use cases that are cataloged are prioritized in a certain fashion as well, because you only have time to do X amount of use cases in Y amount of time. And it's very important to see what is that really matters for you from a risk prioritization perspective. Having logs and detection content in Sentinel is also a function of what kind of detection and prevention controls you have in the backend that are actually feeding into it. If you're a Microsoft customer, then you're integrating obviously with the Microsoft ecosystem software that you have, such as Defender for Endpoint or other pieces. But if you're a non-Microsoft customer and using Sentinel, what we suggest is have a clear list of controls that you have, and you definitely need to feed into your SOC as well. The other key element that comes into play is the lessons learned. What were the past incidents that happened in the organization? And even if past incidents did not happen, what could be the potential incidents that could happen? And based on that, assign the severity of the use cases. Once the use cases have been created in this iterative approach, where we're bringing intelligence together from inside the organization and outside the organization, along with a lot of contextual data, what is important is to assign the right courses of action in case your use case was to trigger a true positive. And once that is done, there's further content that should be deployed using the power of automation, logic apps, and then bringing that into a threat handbook on how an analyst can perform, function, and remediate threats from end to end. So the end-to-end approach, which is really cyclical and iterative in nature, needs to take all of these factors into considerations, because the typical approach of bringing logs in and writing use cases is not going to be effective anymore. And that is where what we see is a lot of clients are spending a lot of time, which is let's understand our threat landscape. Let's understand what kind of threats can manifest. Let's also understand what kind of assets exist, what our crown jewels are, what the past vulnerability assessments are telling us, and what the threat intelligence is telling us as well from a threat landscape perspective. Let's bring all of that into play and try to understand what is it that we need to ingest, for how long, and what is the benefit from a use case perspective. Once all of that is done, what you transform into is you have a system that does monitoring, logging, use case alerting to an intelligent system where you can take care of the alert and threat life cycle from end to end. And that's what it comes down to from a perspective of making it an intelligent SOC and so on. Moving on, our capability, which is global in nature, is called Adaptive Advanced Threat Program. We leverage our global scale to intercept on a regular basis, detect, hunt, and distribute actionable scenarios and insights to our clients in a continuous content delivery model, which is powered by our insights based on our capability for managed security services, implementation services, as well as services related to specialized scenarios such as incident response, global threat intelligence, threat hunting, as well as harvesting a lot of global threat data on a regular basis. This is coupled with our deep expertise in understanding the exploitable attack surface from a vulnerability management perspective and doing constant purple teamings with a variety of our clients to understand what triggers make sense from both a temporal basis as well as the basis of the actual alert and attack volume. This content is a library which is made available to our clients, which runs on top of Microsoft Sentinel and is tuned to our clients' environments to ensure that they can get the best value for their investments from security operations by using the power of our content on top of Microsoft Sentinel. In addition to that, the way the content is deployed, it's maintained and deployed as a code, which is one of the key features and benefits of using this approach, and it can be scaled to multiple different clients at the same time, and the entire community can take benefits from it. So that's effectively what we try to do is leverage our global scale, but ensure that all the intelligence that we have and all the content that we develop, which is of high fidelity, can be distributed as well as deployed to our clients and so on. Moving on, this is an example scenario where we actually look at MITRE ATT&CK framework, and what we do is we try to understand where there's a quick win detection capability that can be deployed in your security operations detection. Is there a tactical initiative in place for detection or protection, and can we leverage that? What is the attack path that an attacker can take with the highest probability when it comes to MITRE in order to realize their objective from end to end across from initial access to exfiltration, collection, or command and control? And what are the different hypothetical paths that an attacker can take with a certain degree of probability? Combining all of that together, in addition to all the data that we have available from your environment and all the data that we gather from your environment and the data that we've gathered from, as I said, a global network of clients, we try to understand what is it that we need to implement, what is the priority of what we need to implement, and where is it that organizations need to put some compensating controls because we have no visibility. This approach goes true for all our threat modeling capabilities before and after we develop our use cases as well as content on top of Microsoft Sentinel. And in addition to that, once this is deployed, we generally try to ensure that this is a robust piece of content which can be used along with red teaming / purple teaming exercises to prove that this is actually working and it's going to actually work in a test scenario, which is where everything kind of ties together as well. So this threat scenario framework and methodology is something that is available to to our clients, as well as we obviously have a lot of other accelerators that we can make available as a part of our overall threat lifecycle management for clients. Now, I'm going to quickly talk about the power and automation of AI, which is really important for threat detection response. But before I do that, I'm going to hand it back to Lavanya to provide insights on AI-powered security operations service.
Thanks, Umang. So security analysts face the huge burden of not only having to sift through a sea of alerts, but also correlate alerts across different products manually, right? This is what was part of a traditional correlation engine that was part of an on-premises SIEM environment. Sentinel uses scalable machine learning algorithms to correlate millions of low-fidelity alerts to a few high-fidelity security incidents. Sentinel also includes user behavior analytics to help identify anomalies, compromised identities, malicious insider actions. The ML technologies will help you to quickly get value from large amounts of security data you're ingesting and connect the dots for you. For example, a compromised account leading to an Office 365 mailbox exfiltration, it helps reduce noise drastically. And then we've seen overall detection reduced to about 90% in alert fatigue for early adopters. These machine learning models are built in and give you the benefits of decades of Microsoft security experience and ongoing knowledge from running hundreds of cloud services. You don't need to be a data scientist to tune such models. They come out of the box are fusion rules, which detect multi-stage attacks, ransomware rules specifically targeting, off-the-shelf ransomware software, and then SecOps teams can also customize ML-based analysis and tune these alerts to reduce false positives, and you can bring in your own ML model into Sentinel if you choose to. So we've done a Forrester total economic impact assessment of Sentinel, where Forrester has gone out and queried a bunch of the common clients of Microsoft and Forrester, and has found that by leveraging Sentinel, you're empowering your SecOps teams to efficiently and better equip to protect your organization. Here are just few examples of those efficiency gains with Sentinel that brings to your security operations. Increased SOC efficiency by cutting false positives up to 79% and reducing that amount of labor needed for advanced investigations by 80%, leading to a 2 million in efficiency gains. A 48% reduction in cost compared to legacy SIEM solution, including savings on licensing, storage, and infrastructure, totaling about a 4.9 million. Reduce those management efforts by 56%, saving 1.2 million. Automatic updates, an intuitive centralized platform, and reduced maintenance meant organizations could shift talent away from servicing infrastructure and concentrate on value-adding initiatives with that proactive threat hunting, for example. And accelerated deployment by 67% with out-of-the-box functionality, simple connections of data sources, and pre-built SIEM content saving around $600,000. So essentially, right, you're seeing Sentinel help those reduction of the alerts and everything so that you could focus on proactively hunting for these threats. And the proactive hunting threat is where you need not only the distilled down alerts that you could look at, but your human expertise and the past intelligence of threats, and then proactively looking for the threats that are out in the wild in your environment. And that's what Sentinel brings to bear, is that reduced alert fatigue so that you can concentrate on what is important to your organization to proactively protect. Back to you, Umang.
Thanks for sharing that, Lavanya. Definitely the total economical impact. That report is really nice. One of my favorite reports, for sure. Now, we are obviously working really close with Microsoft. We're one of the largest or the largest global system integrator from a security perspective. And if you're looking into these solutions, if you're looking to transform your security operations and you've decided on, or if you're looking at Microsoft products, we can help you to rapidly enhance your overall security operations capabilities, in which we can help you understand what you require from an end-to-end perspective as it relates to cyber risk reduction and cyber threat management, but we can also help you design and deploy Microsoft solutions from a security operations perspective. We obviously help a lot of clients to monitor and ensure that their technology investments are being leveraged from a cybersecurity perspective in a way that is the most beneficial for them. And that's where some of our services to monitor how they're using the existing security technologies, and potentially, if it makes sense for them, replacing it with newer technologies that are there in the market, which in this case is Microsoft Sentinel, which add a lot of value to their overall digital risk management. We can do that really easily as well. In addition to that, what I'll quickly show you is just a snippet on how we've been able to do some automation in a very quick fashion within Microsoft Sentinel. Now here what you can see is an alert or an incident that has been raised, and here we can run a playbook that we have created on an incident, which has a various number of steps, such as kind of triaging an incident. And once we run this to triage an incident, what happens is you can see a lot of things that are happening here. You can see all the time that is being saved for each step. Closing tickets only takes 2 minutes now. Creating an incident takes 3 seconds. 2 seconds. Creating a, let's say, ServiceNow ticket takes 3 seconds as well. And as you go through the body of this, we've actually developed a whole library of code which actually automates the function end to end from an alert triage perspective. Our motto and our aim as our philosophy is to automate by design. In this case, you can see that playbook ran and all of this information that typically had to be typed out and enriched by an analyst was typed out and enriched by logic apps within the Microsoft Azure ecosystem. And this is where the power of what we do comes into play to help detect, but also respond as well. Now, what we also do is obviously provide end-to-end deployment services in addition to what we do for Microsoft Sentinel, and these all come into play eventually with our managed security services in the realm of threat detection and response. If you look at threat detection and response, one of the key things that I had mentioned at the beginning of the presentation is the complexity of what the number of tools that exist in the ecosystem. I think it's clear by now that in order to simplify the security operations, you need to bring the right amount of data sources, the right type of data sources that really add value to your environment, but are also going to help you better manage your threats from a use case perspective. It is also clear that you need to automate by design and use the power of automation and to an extent artificial intelligence to ensure that you're rapidly accelerating your mean time to detect, mean time to respond, as well as scaling up your overall security operation centers. But in addition to that, what's also important is working back from the end state. What's needed is a lot of contextual data, which is you need the threat intelligence data, you need the data for endpoint detection response, you need the user data to do proper user and entity behavioral analytics, and you also need data from a cloud perspective as well. All of this tied together, we typically deploy Microsoft technologies as well as transition it into a managed security services play where we can operate this for you 24/7 in a way that we constantly mature your operations as we operate. And that's where the power lies, which is we use our global capability to ensure you're getting the right content, but you're also maturing your overall cyber operations using the power of Microsoft technologies, but really powered by PwC content, which is a lot of threat detection content that we've written, as well as response content that we've written in terms of automation for a number of our clients. So again, I think if there's any further questions, we can take it as a part of our Q&A. But that's basically a high-level overview of our rapid deployment service where we can turn things on very, very quickly. Now, there is obviously a lot of our clients that also ask us, does it make sense to, go best of breed, best of platform, or what have you? And the answer to that question is it depends. A lot of our clients who are running Azure prefer to go into the world of Microsoft Sentinel with log analytics, logic apps to ensure that they're building a capability to identify and respond threats in real time, but in a very effective fashion. You can take the existing SIEM or SOAR or UEBA in your environment and existing threat intel and slowly migrate it or rapidly migrate it based on what the strategy is into a solution that is really powered by PwC's threat intelligence, PwC's use cases, and running on top of Microsoft Sentinel log analytics and logic apps to ensure you can detect, automate, and respond to threats on a regular basis. And we did do this. We have had deployments where we've done this and turned this on in a matter of a month. So it really depends on how fast our clients want to move. And we have a lot of accelerators ready to ensure that they can move much faster than what they thought they could move at. And that's where the real power comes in, because you get from start of planning to start of operations and maturation right away in a very short period of time, and kind of gives you a lot of benefits as well. With that said, what we'd like to do is open up for any questions. But before I do that, Lavan, if you have any closing thoughts, please go ahead.
Yeah, so definitely leverage the power of Sentinel. There's a trial that could be used, and then when you're thinking about the Sentinel, look at also the cost benefits you would get with E5 licensing. If you're already licensed for E5, there's a benefit for that. There's a 31-day trial period that you can sign up with Sentinel, and as Umang pointed out, you could do a side-by-side deployment to transition over time. The easiest quick win a lot of our customers do is deploy Sentinel and start ingesting all of the cloud services that they've already moved into Azure or M365, because that ingestion is free of cost versus putting that data into your on-premises SIEM is going to require you to spin up either new infrastructure or additional licensing and so on and so forth. So you can eliminate all that by simply turning on Sentinel to ingest your cloud sources from Azure and M365, and then, slowly start moving other SaaS solutions, right? Sentinel is not just for M365 and Azure solutions. We have over 1,000 connectors for various other platforms natively built into Sentinel. There's a content hub with Marketplace with all of the connectors from third-party solutions like AWS S3 buckets, Oracle cloud environments to ingest into your environment. So one closing thought is, leverage Sentinel and AI power and, transition over from your on-premises SIEM to cut down on that noise, but then, really to proactively hunt for those threats and stay one step ahead of attackers is use that human expertise. And that brings, proactive threat hunting with the solution like the PwC solution here. Back to you, Ma.
Thank you. We'll open up for questions now. Sandy, over to you.
Okay, Hugh, if you'd like to go ahead and pose the questions from the group, that would be great.
For sure. Just trolling through a few of them here. Here's the first question of the day. Can you define what SOC modernization really means? What technology and security trends should I be thinking about when I'm refreshing my SOC? And I think I'll direct that one to Umang.
Yeah. So what SOC? Well, first of all, SOC modernization. What it means is keep modernizing your SOC. What's going to be pertinent today is going to be old tomorrow. Threats are going to change. The way threats manifest themselves are going to change. So when you think of SOC modernization, start with outcomes. What outcomes do you want to achieve? And what is it that you want to enable? A lot of times what we've seen is it becomes a discussion about tools. It becomes a discussion about which cool technology is there. But think of what is it that you're trying to detect? What is it that you're trying to respond to? What are your key objectives? What are your threat management principles? And ultimately create a blueprint of what good looks like, of your target state from a people, process, technology, and governance perspective. Once that is done, take a step back and understand, does your current technology landscape support that objective or not? Does your current people landscape support that objective or not? And does your current process landscape support that objective or not? And if it does not, try to understand how can you accelerate some of that and what roadmap would that look like? So from a SOC modernization perspective, that's the overall, I would say, methodology that one can look into or should be using. But in terms of which technologies need modernization, we heavily recommend our clients to use code as a service. Again, we spoke about, the library of use cases that we deploy rapidly, which is connected to MITRE framework, which is related to the threat landscape and all that. And make sure your threat content is dynamic in nature, because if it's not dynamic, then you're not responding to the latest threats that are out there. The second thing that we would say is ensure that you're automating by design so that the volume of alerts that the analysts will get are taken care of in a certain way. And the third thing is, even though you automate, what you would notice is that there's still a lot of alerts to action. And the reason for that is going to be the fidelity of the use cases that you've deployed, which really should be tightened up and should be tested by the power of automated red teaming or manual red teaming. We prefer automated, obviously, the power of what your attack surface is from a vulnerability management perspective, and also what the asset base looks like. So that's how I would answer that question, Hugh. But that was a really excellent question, whoever asked that.
Some good insights there, Umang, for sure. Next question that we have on the list here is, it says, I'm concerned with the adoption of cloud-based SecOps technologies. If we're monitoring on-prem systems, will I pay a premium in bandwidth in cloud storage? So I think I'm going to direct that one at Lavanya.
Yeah, and so ultimately, you want a single pane of glass with security monitoring, right? Whether that data resides on premises, whether that solution resides in multi-cloud or, a single cloud. That single pane of glass, as we touched earlier in the presentation, right? You need the cloud solution based. So you really don't want to spin up one for on-premises, one for cloud solution and lose that visibility, right? And correlation of the alerts. And as your on-premises footprint, if it does increase on the edge or whatever, right, you don't want to be again in the business of spinning up infrastructure to keep up with it. Now, in terms of cost, right, first thing is we provide you agents and connectors to bring your on-premises data into Sentinel through Azure Arc, and then we give you agents where you can really pare down that into security information, right? You're not ingesting all the proof logs from the server because they have little to no security value. So leveraging those tools, you're bringing in and paying per use. So whether that's on-premises, whether that's cloud, you again have that single pane of glass. And then, regardless of on-premises or cloud, right, your modernization of SOC is all about, you're no longer thinking in a perimeter network, right? You have users that are straddling mobile devices or switching between devices throughout a workday or accessing 1 minute of cloud service and down to an on-premises server. So you need to switch away from that perimeter security, right? So your SecOps are now thinking about controlling that point of entry, which is no longer network, right? Identity is the new control plane. So you want to start with identity security, regardless of where that application is hosted, whether that's on-premises or in the cloud. And then move on to device, because ultimately it's the device that ends up accessing the app, right? So control that device through conditional access policies and identity controls. And then you're looking at the application controls, right? And that, if you're putting identity before even that front-end application, you're going for single sign-on. So again, you want all of those logs that are already in the cloud. So you want to ingest from the cloud to correlate that data along with the application security, right? Otherwise, you're going to miss and you'll end up having silos. So in terms of cost, though, right, back to the question, right, you have ways of dealing with the cost, and whether spinning up siloed environments in on-premises versus cloud, the cost comparison of what you're going to miss out or a breach that happens, that is what you would need to calculate in addition to, what would be the cost of just moving that data into cloud.
Excellent. That's it's a lot of good information there, Lavanya. Just looking at the next question here. Next question is perhaps somewhat simpler, but with the increasing emphasis on the adoption of cloud technologies, yes, by large organizations, what impact is this really having on SecOps processes? How different are they within this environment? And I think I'm going to address this one to Umang.
Yeah, thank you. So I would say fundamentally the SecOps processes, and I think depends on which process we're talking about from a SecOps perspective, fundamentally they're not changing, which is a good news. It's not like we're making a major shift and then there's this big learning curve from a SecOps processes perspective on how SecOps actually works. However, what is changing is how do we actually deal with threats on the cloud environment, and how do we understand what the threat landscape looks like from a cloud perspective. So definitely how we do threat modeling changes in the cloud, not the actual threat modeling, but what we all need to consider in terms of threat modeling needs to change on the cloud. also what is changing is how do you actually respond to things on the cloud? How do you block things on the cloud? How do you take remediation actions on the cloud? The third thing I would say is how do you actually put your architecture on the cloud, as well as how do you take something that you've developed and do it in a way that you're able to look at different types of cloud environments, which is SaaS, PaaS, IaaS, etc., and see how that can be integrated and the different risks that they're posing to you. So ultimately, what is really changing from a SecOps perspective is how you do threat modeling and how do you do threat response from a cloud perspective. But from a cloud security perspective, obviously a lot is changing as well. The principles of security remain the same, but there's a lot changing and a lot has changed on how do you actually secure a cloud from an end-to-end perspective.
Thanks, Umang. That was a great answer. We do have another question that has just popped into the chat here. The question is, what is the cost model for Sentinel? How is the budget different from a traditional SIEM? And I'll send that one to Lavanya.
Yeah, great question. So really the comparison is the opposite from a traditional versus Sentinel cloud native solution, right? Just as your on-premises infrastructure versus a cloud infrastructure. First is you do pay-per-use, right? You're no longer thinking about spinning up infrastructure or the database storage size and all other aspects of it. So in a traditional SIEM, I believe you were charged one licensing for ingestion. There was a licensing for visualization of the data. There's a separate product or add-on for automation. Right. That is taken, or user entity behavior analysis is a popular one, right? You know, there's an add-on for that additional user behavioral entity analysis, oftentimes in an on-premises model. With Sentinel, right, you're not paying for any of those individual components. It all comes out of the box. What you're paying for, one of the similarities would be, you know, the amount of data you're ingesting, right? And that's where you have granular controls to keep that cost minimized, right? You know, ensure that you're only ingesting security data and not putting in your performance data, which has little to no security value, through, you know, granular controls in the agents, like DCR, data collection rules in Azure Monitor Agent, for example. And then, you know, pay for that ingestion. And then, you know, automation is part of Sentinel. User behavioral analytics, you're not really paying anything extra for it. It's an add-on that you would pay in on-premises environment. And then we offer you commitment tiers too to reduce that cost. And in addition to that, we've recently released features that are in public preview right now for, you know, bringing logs from your network appliances. For example, think your VPNs, think your firewalls that are important for providing entity enrichment, right, into your analytic rules, but have little to no value again after a period of time, right? You know, they matter in the context of the alert for certain time. So we provide you basic logs, which allow you to ingest data from those network appliances and allow you to keep it for 8 days, because beyond that, we don't anticipate any security value from them. And you're paying a lower cost for those than your regular security logs. If you are required by regulatory compliance or some other requirement to retain those logs, security logs, for up to 7 years or 5 years or whatever period, we offer you right in log analytics solution to shift that data to a lower tier of storage, but still provide you a way to search through that data if you need to, archive the logs, and then, you know, we have searching logs. So separate tiers of costs based on that what solution you're using, where the logs are residing. So these are all the ways for you to contain the cost, which are not available in a traditional SIEM, right? You know, you don't have different tiers of storage, hot and cold storage, or still being able to access that information for threat hunting if need be. Back to you, Hugh.
Thanks, Lavanya. So I think we have time for one last question here. And I'm going to I'm going to just put it out. So the final question is, are there specific threats and monitoring use cases that cloud-based monitoring technologies are better designed to deal with? And certainly interested in both your thoughts on this, but I'll start with you, Mang.
Yeah, I think the question is, what do we mean by cloud-based monitoring technologies, right? So there's cloud-based monitoring technologies that are being provided by different cloud SaaS vendors, right? And there's not multiple SIEMs out there which do that. And then there's cloud-based monitoring technologies like Sentinel that Microsoft provides. I think the answer to the question is, it really depends on how intelligently you feed your SIEM and the capabilities of your SIEM. If you have a capable tool set and a capable SIEM, but you're not feeding the right information, you're not designing your use cases the right way, you're not giving it contextual information, it's going to be garbage in, garbage out. However, if you, let's say hypothetically, if you're an Azure user, you're 100% of your environment is on Azure, you can have by default all the security alerts, native security alerts going to Sentinel, and that can act as a single pane of glass for cloud-related threats, and gives you a minimum baseline that you need. I won't say minimum baseline, but it gives you some kind of a baseline that you need for monitoring over there. However, if you're using a SaaS-based SIEM, at the same time you have a hybrid or multi-cloud environment, then the answer would really depend on how you put your architecture together. On from an on-prem perspective, how do you pull those logs from, let's say, if you're using cloud provider B, how do you pull the logs from there? And if you're using, let's say, Microsoft along with it, how do you pull the logs there, right? So it all comes down to fidelity of your tool set. Do you have the right tool set with you for SecOps? B, are you collecting the right information and data based on the use cases you want to monitor? And C, do you have the right kind of controls in place in your environment? But having said that, some solutions which are running natively on the cloud do give you the leverage, like Sentinel, to kind of bring the native logs in a rapid fashion without you having to go configure them, and really kind of reduces the time to value that otherwise the solutions may take longer to come up to speed with.
Thanks for your insights there, Umang. Lavanya, is there anything that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, so shifting to cloud doesn't really shift your security posture completely, right? You still are worried about the same things that you are worried on premises. You still want to do defense in depth strategy. So your SecOps strategy does not drastically change. But what would change, I would say, is back to, thinking of security monitoring, right? The way you were used to, I'm going to secure my perimeter from on-premises environment before cloud, right? And that's what I'm going to, by default, assume that once you're in the perimeter that you are a trusted resource, right? With that zero trust methodology is what more and more organizations are adopting, is because of that cloud transition, right? With the cloud transition, your perimeter is shifting, right? It's identity, it's endpoints. So with that zero trust approach for cloud is that shift of defense in depth model, but no longer stopping at the network layer, right? Moving to the bottom layers, which which most organizations didn't worry about or ignored in the on-premises world. Unfortunately, you can no longer ignore them, right? You're shifting to cloud means you start thinking about securing identity, securing those devices, especially with everybody being remote right now, right? And everybody wanting to work from any device, any network, right? So start securing those. Once that's the one strategy I would say your SecOps would need to start thinking about. And that's where, going back to the previous question, right? On-premises resource, why would I use a cloud solution, is because of that perimeter shift, right? Because you are still using one identity, regardless of whether it's a cloud solution or it's an on-premises solution or a multi-cloud solution. And having that visibility and shifting first into identity and shifting into a single pane of glass, and definitely agree and concur with Umang, is feeding or threat intelligence data that you're utilizing is crucial too. Out of the box, Sentinel does have a lot of threat intelligence feeds that you can use, right? We have our Risk IQ acquisition that we did, where, we'll be bringing about native threat intelligence from Microsoft solutions, as well as we support a lot of third-party platforms that you can bring in, or, leverage the IOCs that you've built over the years with that on-premises solution that you've had. But that's how I would say is shift that mindset to zero trust framework, right? Assume breach, verify explicitly, and use least privilege.
Thanks, Lavanya. We are quickly running out of time. I'll just pass things back to Umang to wrap things up before we pass that back to Sandy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. I think if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or anybody in our PwC team. My contact details are over here. And obviously, as we're going through this major digital transformation in the overall digital supply ecosystem, we'll be very happy to be your partners in helping you reach your business objectives by better security in conjunction with Microsoft. So thank you again. Over to you, Sandy.
Great. Thanks, Umang. And thank you, PwC Canada and Microsoft, for today's presentation. Thanks for joining us today, and we hope you enjoyed the session and found today's information valuable. If you had a question that wasn't answered or addressed in the live session, please feel free to ask the question in the comments section of the survey. The survey will pop up at the end of this session, and you'll also be receiving an email with information on the survey. To access the webinar recording, please click on the same link you used to join the session today. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. This concludes our webinar.